My name is Walter Henley. I'm 61 years old and I've lived in the same county my entire life. Not out of fear, not from lack of opportunity, but because I built something here. With my own hands, with time, with sweat. And for a long time, I thought, with love. I'm not one for drama or grand declarations. Never was. I fix what's broken, keep my head down, and do what needs doing. That's how I was raised. My father was a factory man. My mother was quiet, gentle, and always tired. I grew up knowing how to mend a fence before I knew how to write a check. I guess some things stick. I've been married to Sandra for 3 decades, 30 years. We met at a local church fundraiser. She was selling raffle tickets. I was setting up the lights. She had this way of speaking that made you feel like you were the only one in the room. Sharp, clever. She liked to joke that I was the hands and she was the head. And maybe for a long time that was true. I'm an electrician by trade. There isn't a street light, a breaker box, or a ceiling fan I can't handle. When Sandra and I bought our house, it was nothing more than 4 walls and a roof that whistled in the wind. But I saw what it could be. I wired every outlet, laid down every tile, built the porch with a hammer that had belonged to my grandfather. I even carved our initials into the underside of the kitchen counter. Nobody knows that but me. Sandra always appreciated what I did with my hands. She told me I could make a palace out of a shed. Golden hands, she'd say, smiling, brushing sawdust off my shirt. And I've got the head to match. She took care of everything I didn't understand, or didn't bother to. The taxes, the bills, the insurance, the paperwork. I'd bring home the money, and she'd make sure the lights stayed on and the mortgage was paid. We had a system, a rhythm. She kept records in color-coded folders stacked neatly in the hall closet. I saw them sometimes, never opened them, of course. Just the sight of them gave me peace. She was meticulous. Everything labeled, dated, alphabetized. I never asked questions, never snooped. It's not that I was naive, I just didn't think I needed to be suspicious. That's the difference. When someone tells you they love you every night for 30 years, you don't assume they're hiding anything behind your back. I didn't even open the mailbox, not once in years. Sandra always got there first, usually before I pulled into the driveway. She'd wave an envelope in the air, glance at the return address, and toss it in the kitchen drawer, or straight into the bin. Just more junk, she'd say, and I believed her. I believed a lot of things. But life has a funny way of peeling back the paint. You start to see the cracks that were always there. Things you missed, things you chose not to see. It started with a letter, one I wasn't supposed to find, one that never made it to the kitchen drawer, and once I opened it, once I read what was inside, I realized something bone deep and cold. She knew exactly what she was doing, and I didn't know a damn thing. It was a Tuesday. I remember that clearly. Not because something special happened, just the opposite. It was a dull, unremarkable day in February, one of those gray mornings where the sky feels like wet wool and the ground never quite dries. I had taken the day off work. My knees were acting up, and I figured I earned a break. I went out early to pick up some parts from the hardware store and came back around 10. Sandra wasn't home, said she had a dentist appointment in town. The mail had already been delivered. Normally, she'd scoop it up before I even noticed the truck driving off. But that morning, for whatever reason, it was still sitting in the box. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I pulled the envelopes out, flipping through them as I walked up the steps. Grocery circular, an oil change coupon, a white envelope with an official-looking seal printed in blue ink. Department of Revenue and Land Records. I stopped in the middle of the porch. I don't know why I opened it. Curiosity, maybe, or something quieter, something that had been sitting inside me for a long time without a name. I tore it open without thinking, expecting a tax update or maybe something to do with property reassessment. It wasn't that. It was a change of ownership notification, neatly printed in black and white, like someone typing up a grocery list. The parcel number was ours. The house we lived in for 3 decades. The house I wired from the ground up, brick by damn brick. It listed the old owners and the new one. Former owner, Sandra Henley. New owner, Jason Teller. Relationship to transfer. Nephew. I remember blinking at it, like I was misreading the words. I thought maybe it was some mistake, maybe a neighbor with a similar address. Maybe there was another Sandra Henley on the street, but the parcel number was unmistakable. Our home, our land, our life, and Jason Teller. That was her sister's boy, 27, maybe 28 now. Works in tech somewhere out west. I hadn't seen him in person since he was a teenager. He used to come around during the holidays, all polite smiles and earbuds hanging out of his ears. I remembered once fixing his laptop after he dropped it. He said I was old school but efficient. My hands started shaking, not like fear, more like when you hold a live wire too long and your body doesn't quite know what to do with the current. When Sandra got home that afternoon, she was humming, carrying a little paper bag from the pharmacy and talking about the weather. Something about how the daffodils were already peeking out too early this year. She dropped her keys in the bowl, kicked off her shoes, and reached into the fridge for a soda like nothing had happened. I didn't say anything right away. I watched her. I wanted to see if something in her face changed, if she knew what was coming. Finally, I asked, "Why is your nephew listed as the new owner of this house?" She didn't flinch, didn't blink, just glanced over her shoulder and raised an eyebrow like I'd asked why the sink was leaking. "Oh, that. It's just a paperwork thing, to save us money on taxes." "To save us money?" I repeated slowly. "Yes, it's temporary. You don't need to worry about it. It's part of a trust. You wouldn't understand. Lots of legal terms. Family protection, that sort of thing. It's all above board." She gave me that smile, the one she used when I asked too many questions about bills or forms or why we needed a second checking account. It was the smile that said, "You fix wires, I fix problems." "I didn't sign anything," I said. She shrugged. "It's all electronic now. Some things don't require joint signatures anymore. And don't worry, it's still ours. Nothing changes." I stood there with the paper in my hand, heavy as a brick. Something in me wanted to believe her, just like always. But something else had started to shift. Something small but sharp, a splinter under the skin. She went on about needing to update the pantry, said she was thinking of repainting the bedroom, told me not to be so serious, that it was all temporary, all for the benefit of the family. I said nothing more that night, but I didn't throw the letter away. I folded it, quietly, slipped it into an old metal toolbox in the shed between a spool of wire and a set of worn-down screwdrivers. And the next day, I started looking. I've never been much of a snoop, never saw the point. If something's wrong, it usually floats to the surface on its own. But that week, I couldn't stop thinking about the way she brushed me off. Not just the words she used. "You wouldn't understand." It was how casually she said it, like I was a child asking about the stock market, like I had no right to the house I'd built with my own hands. So I started with the obvious place, the hall closet, the one with all her folders. I waited until she went to visit her sister for the afternoon. She does that sometimes, says it's good for her nerves. I watched the car pull out of the driveway, waited another 10 minutes just to be sure, and then opened the closet door. There they were, neatly stacked, color-coded tabs, blue for utilities, green for taxes, yellow for personal. I didn't even know there was a red one until that day. Red, trust documents. I sat down right there on the hallway floor. My knees didn't appreciate it, but I needed to see for myself. Inside were contracts, real ones, stamped, dated, initialed, and one document in particular, printed on thick cream paper, caught my eye. It was the property transfer deed, naming her nephew Jason as the beneficiary of the house. No mention of me. No clause about joint ownership. No note about temporary anything. There was a section labeled Justification for Transfer, to consolidate family assets within a protected trust for future generational benefit. Grantor affirms sole ownership. Sole ownership. My name wasn't on a single page, not even as a witness. And from the look of it, everything had been filed 6 months ago. She hadn't just made a tax decision. She'd signed our home, my home, over to her nephew. Quietly, without a word. And by the time I found out, the ink had long since dried. The thing about paperwork is, once you start pulling at one thread, the whole sweater starts to unravel. I found a contact card tucked in one of the back sleeves of the folder. A lawyer's name, Michael R. Green, Estate and Family Law. I called him that same day. Didn't give my name at first, just asked general questions. He was polite, formal, the kind of voice that charges by the hour even when he breathes. When I finally told him my name and mentioned the property in question, there was a pause. Not long, but long enough for me to notice. Mr. Henley, he said, choosing his words carefully, I can confirm that I handled the documentation on behalf of your wife, Sandra Henley. All procedures were followed according to the law. But I never signed anything. Correct. The property was solely in your wife's name, Mr. Henley. No, I said, steady but cold. That house was ours. Another pause. I understand this may come as a surprise, he said, but from a legal standpoint, ownership is based on title, not contribution. I'm afraid your name was never on the deed. And just like that, it all made sense. All those years she insisted on handling the paperwork. All those times she said it was easier if just one of us signed the forms. All those moments I chose to trust instead of ask. She had planned this. It wasn't a mistake or a rushed decision or a slip of judgment. It was calculated, quiet, done over years, maybe decades, like slowly turning off a valve until the well runs dry and you don't even notice you're thirsty. I hung up the phone without another word. Then I packed a small bag, just enough for a few days. Work boots, jeans, a few shirts, and the letter from the Department of Revenue, now folded into quarters and tucked into my wallet like a keepsake. Sandra called twice that night, left one voicemail. Walt, what's going on? I thought you said you had a job in the morning. Where are you? I didn't answer. The next morning, I texted her 3 words. On a business trip. No explanation, no anger, just distance. And I drove. Not toward the city, not toward family or friends, but toward the one place I hadn't told her about. Because a year and a half ago, I'd started something. Quietly, slowly, with no blueprints but my own. A second house, and it was time to go home. The road out of town was familiar. I'd driven it 100 times before, used to take Sandra out that way to look at antiques or visit her cousin with the horses. But now, driving alone, the trees seemed taller, the sky felt wider, and the silence in the truck cab, it wasn't heavy, it was clean, like space before sound. An hour and 15 minutes from the city line, I turned off the main highway. A gravel road led through a thicket of birch trees, still bare from winter. The tires kicked up a soft plume of dust. No GPS, no mailbox, no name on the gate, just a padlock and a keypad. I punched in the code. The gate creaked open. A year and a half ago, I'd inherited a plot of land from my older brother Tom. 58 acres and change. Forest mostly. Unclear boundaries. Half of it was tangled brush, the other half hill and granite. Not the kind of land people fight over. Not unless they see what it could become. Sandra had never liked Tom. Said he was too rough around the edges. She wasn't sad when he passed, and she certainly never asked what he'd left behind. So when the letter came from the probate office, I said it was just some old tools. She never questioned me. That land had been waiting, quietly, and so had I. I didn't rush. I worked weekends, evenings, took small deliveries under different names, one for lumber, one for concrete mix. A buddy from my old union days helped me pour the foundation. I paid cash, no records. The first time I stood in the unfinished frame, roof open to the sky, it didn't feel like a getaway. It felt like truth. A space that was only mine. No demands, no corrections, no voices saying you wouldn't understand paperwork anyway. I did everything by hand, wired every outlet myself, installed plumbing with care, chose fixtures not because they were trendy, but because they were quiet, functional, and strong, the kind that last. I didn't think of it as hiding, not back then. I thought of it as a gift to myself, a little retreat for after retirement, a place to tinker, to be left alone. But now, standing at the edge of the clearing, watching the outline of the 2-story structure rise against the morning sky, I saw it for what it really was. An escape route I didn't know I was building. And suddenly I was grateful for every late night spent drilling by flashlight. Every bag of mortar mixed in silence. Every board nailed into place without asking permission. I stepped inside. The walls were bare pine, warm even in the cold. The floor smelled of sawdust and linseed oil. I could still see pencil marks on the beams, my own rough sketches, done freehand when I didn't want to go back for the plans. There were no pictures, no rugs, no curtains, but it felt more like home than the house Sandra stole from me. I stayed 3 days in silence. No TV, no music, just a fire in the wood stove, a cot, and the long, slow return of my own thoughts. Then I made a call. Not to Sandra, not to Jason, not to anyone who thought they knew me. I called a lawyer, not the kind Sandra used, a man I'd met by accident a year ago when I helped fix a blown breaker at his office. He'd given me his card and said, "If you ever need something untangled, give me a ring. I owe you." His name was Martin Langford. He remembered me, told me to come in, and I did. I brought the tax letter, the deed, the photos of the contract I'd taken from Sandra's folder. I told him what I'd found, how long it had been going on, how I hadn't signed a thing. He listened, quietly, respectfully. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Walter, you've got more leverage than you think." "Doesn't feel like it," I said. "Feels like I let her run me over for 30 years. Martin smiled, but not kindly, more like a man sizing up a chessboard. "You've got a house," he said, "one that no one knows about, built with funds separate from marital accounts. You've got proof of deceptive property transfer, and you've got a clean record of not fighting back until now." He handed the documents back to me one by one. "Let's file." And just like that, the game changed. I drove back into town the same way I left it. Quiet, steady, unannounced. Sandra didn't notice I was gone for 3 days. She thought I was still on that emergency work trip in Omaha. That's how little we were speaking lately. Or maybe how little she cared to ask. When I walked into the house, she was sitting at the kitchen table, doing a crossword in ink like always. She looked up once. Barely. "Did you eat?" she asked. "I'm good," I said. "Thought you'd be gone longer." That was it. No hug, no questions, no guilt. Just an ordinary Tuesday in the life of a man whose name had quietly disappeared from his own house. I played it slow. For 2 weeks, I stayed calm. I fixed a leak under the sink, changed out a breaker in the garage, made her coffee like I always did. 2 sugars, no milk. She thanked me once, and then she went on texting Jason about progress. Yes, I saw that too. The password to her phone hadn't changed in 5 years. I never used to check it. I do now. She'd been messaging him almost daily. Updates about the property, about potential resale value, about how Walt doesn't get it. He thinks this is still 1995. That stung, but it also helped. Martin had advised me to stay patient. "Let her feel safe," he said. "The more you give her rope, the more she wraps it around herself." Meanwhile, he built the case. When we filed for divorce, it wasn't dramatic. I didn't confront her at the breakfast table. I didn't throw a tantrum or shout about betrayal. We had the papers served at her job. Her face must have frozen when she read the claim. Breach of fiduciary duty in marriage. Undisclosed transfer of jointly owned property. Deception regarding asset disposition. That night she came home pale. Her hand was shaking when she set down her purse. "You filed?" she asked. "Yeah, I said, calm. "With a lawyer?" "Yes." "Walter, we could have talked." "No, you could have talked. Instead, you forged a financial future with a 27-year-old who thinks drywall is just the stuff inside walls." She looked stunned, like the ground had shifted under her, and maybe it had. "But it wasn't even real yet," she said. "I just needed your signature to—" "I never gave it," I interrupted. "But I gave 30 years, and that counts." She tried to pivot, the way she always had. Said it was a tax strategy. Said her cousin did the same thing, and it was standard practice for asset management. But by then, Martin had already exposed the whole web. Jason was applying for a mortgage using my house as collateral. The deed was fully transferred months ago. She'd signed as power of attorney, which I had never granted. Fraud. Quiet, hidden, intimate fraud. The judge took one look at the evidence, and moved faster than I expected. The case didn't drag. There were no long speeches in court, just filings, documents, signatures, cold, mechanical, final. And then, the surprise. That beautiful house I'd built by hand, fully separate, untouchable. The land was inherited, the materials paid for from a personal inheritance account, and the structure registered under a trust I set up with Martin before filing. The court didn't even blink. It was mine. But her nephew's house, my old house, had problems. Turns out Jason had been using it as leverage for a business venture involving crypto kiosks and outdoor advertising. He'd taken loans, missed payments. The property was encumbered with debt. Technically, it belonged to him, but now it was also tagged with liens, taxes, and litigation risk. Sandra's face when she realized it, it wasn't rage, it wasn't grief, it was confusion. She genuinely hadn't imagined I could play the game better than her. "Walter," she whispered, "you can't just walk away after 30 years. "I'm not walking," I said. "I'm rebuilding. And this time, I know what every nail means." The court didn't give me the house back, but it gave me something far more satisfying. It gave me proof, written, stamped, legal, that she'd betrayed the foundation of our marriage. Not with a man, not with a lie whispered in the dark, but with a pen, with signatures behind my back. That made all the difference. Sandra's lawyer tried to argue intent, said she had only meant to temporarily protect the asset, to help her nephew get started. Said I would have been fine with it if I'd understood the paperwork. I watched the judge's eyes narrow. They always think older men are naive, but this older man had receipts. Martin presented timelines, bank statements, emails, a record of the land purchase for my second house, made discreetly under my late brother's name, and gifted to me through inheritance. And then, the dagger. A notarized letter from a financial advisor confirming I had invested the majority of our liquid savings separately after her first suspicious withdrawal 18 months ago. I'd moved quick the moment I saw her pull 10 grand for dental work and never get a filling. Her face was a study in panic. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She was calculating, desperate to regain footing. The judge asked if I was seeking restitution or merely division of assets. "I'd like half the value of the house she gave away," I said. "She doesn't own it anymore," her lawyer cut in. "I know, but she did when she signed it over, and she never consulted me. That's theft under the veil of marriage." The judge agreed. Sandra was ordered to pay half the assessed market value of the house, as if it had been sold, not gifted, to Jason, which meant she now owed me nearly $190,000. Except she didn't have that kind of money. Not after all the renovations she and Jason had started on the place. Not after taking a second mortgage in his name. Not after moving retirement funds into crypto assets he swore were low risk. So what happened? The bank came for the property. Jason couldn't pay. Sandra tried to refinance. She couldn't. In the end, the house she tried to steal from me, the one I had wired, plumbed, and nailed with my own hands, got auctioned off to cover debts. Not for me. Not out of revenge. Just numbers on a page. Sandra begged for negotiation. She called late one night, her voice half hopeful, half broken. "Walter, listen. Maybe we could come to some agreement. You can't just let everything go." "I didn't let anything go," I said. "I just stopped holding what wasn't mine anymore." "I made mistakes," she said, "but you're not innocent either." "No," I said. "I was worse. I was loyal." There was a long pause, then I added, steady as ever. "You used to say I had golden hands and no head. Maybe you were right, but I learned. You took the house with paperwork. I took it back with silence. You win games. I build click." She never called again. Now I wake up with the sun, not an alarm. The birds get to sing their morning songs without being drowned out by the hum of Sandra's hairdryer or the low drone of her morning complaints. I make my coffee in a quiet kitchen. One I built, cabinet by cabinet, tile by tile. The counter is solid oak, sealed with care. The handles on the drawers are forged iron. I remember the heat of the metal when I shaped them. There's not a single thing in this house I didn't touch with intention. No lies in the walls. No secrets under the floorboards. The land is mine, inherited from my brother. Quiet, surrounded by tall pines and honest wind. When I first started building here, I thought I was just making a getaway. I didn't know it would become my salvation. The house has no internet yet. I haven't decided if I want it. Instead, I read real books, the kind you hold and smell in dog ear. I work in the garden. Some days I drive to town and help an old friend rewire his garage. Not for money, just because my hands don't like to stay still. Sandra sent me a card last month. No return address, just her handwriting, neat, familiar, curled in the way she used to write grocery lists. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I remember the good years too. I didn't reply. She's not the villain of my story, but she's not the ending either. The funny part is, I really didn't understand paperwork. Still don't. I don't pretend to. I leave that to Martin now. Every 3 months he visits, we sit on the porch, and he walks me through anything legal or financial over a glass of iced tea. But you know what I do understand? Nails, weight, balance, time. I understand that if you drive a screw in crooked, the whole frame shifts, and it takes more effort to straighten it later than if you just stopped and done it right in the first place. I understand that some damage hides well, that rot begins inside the beam, that it takes a knock, a crack, or a storm to expose what's already been broken for years. And I understand that not everything that breaks needs to be rebuilt with the same people. So now I live here, in a house I built with no help, no lies, no apologies. Every plank has purpose, every room has peace, and every morning, when I open the front door, the only person I have to trust is the man holding the handle. Me.